Good morning, everyone. My name is Keira Proctor and I'm the Managing Director here at the Proctor Group Limited. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for attending our webinar today, and I hope everyone is doing well and taking care. This is our 7th webinar of 2022 and our second roundtable discussion. So for our discussion today, we have a number of very special guests who will shortly be introducing themselves, and they're all here to talk about the future benefits of offsite construction. So we'll try to finish as close to 11 o'clock as we can, but what we found with our last roundtable discussion is that there were still questions unanswered. So the panel have agreed to stay on a little bit longer today, so please feel free to ask away. Now you can ask your questions here on YouTube, you can email us at webinar@proctorgroup.com, or you can DM us on Twitter @proctorgroup. Personalised CPD certification is also available at the usual place on our website, www.proctorgroup.com/webinar. Just a really quick date for the diary before we start today. Our next webinar is on the 29th of July, same time, 10 AM, so Friday the 29th of July. And it's going to be an interesting case study on a self-build. Raptite on Charleston Farm in Errol, which is actually very close to where I live. So I've been lucky enough to head along and see the site myself a number of months ago when it was in the construction phase. And it's a really interesting low energy project, which has been designed and built by architect Francis Strachan Fryer. So please join us on the 29th of July at 10 AM to hear more about that. If you've registered today, you'll receive a follow-up email with all the links and a replay, so please feel free to share it with your colleagues and friends. And it really helps us out if you give us a thumbs up on video, and also please subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can have more information about what we're rolling out in the business, our next webinars. So again, it'll keep you up to date with everything that's going on. So because we have slightly limited time today, what I'm going to do is ask the panel to introduce themselves individually. So guys, what I'm going to ask you to do, and when I ask you to, is just introduce yourself, give a little bit of background, where you work, and really just a very quick overview on your personal thoughts around the future benefits of offsite construction in the UK. So 2 to 3 minutes, please, not too long, because we're keen to get started with the Q&A. So Claire, can I start with you, please?
Yes, of course. Hi, everybody. My name's Clare Fenton. I'm a specialist building envelope consultant for Fenton Partners, and have been involved in building designs for well over 20 years now. I'm also co-founder of Veritherm and co-invented the Veritherm solution, which is a rapid thermal performance test for buildings. And as a result, I've been involved in building performance for about 7 to 8 years. I'm chair of the MCRMA, so that's the Metal Cladding Roofing Manufacturers Association. And I've also been a lead industrial partner on the Construction Innovation Hub's platform programme. And I've been involved with that for nearly 4 years, and I also sit on their strategy board. And last month, I was presented with the Lifetime in Construction Award by European Women in Construction and Engineering. In my mind, the future benefits of off-site construction are positive, but only if those involved really capitalise on the opportunities this opportunity can bring. It's a chance for the construction industry to step aside from current construction methods and start to create a new model with clear rules and governance to run alongside existing methods. It doesn't matter how we package it, offsite, modular, platform, MMC, we really have the chance to embrace quality, repeatability, reliability, accountability, innovation, speed, value, and skills. But however, the big message for me out of all of this is opportunity. Thanks.
Thanks, Claire. And what fantastic accolades you have in your career. Thank you for that. Nathan, could I ask you to do the same, please?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thanks, Claire. That was really interesting. So good morning, everybody. I'm Nathan Beattie from Beattie Passive. We're a modular passive house company who deliver both new build and retrofit within our factory in Norfolk. We've delivered over 450 homes now, all built to sort of passive house standards, not necessarily certified by the Institute, but built to those standards. I just want to briefly sort of touch on 3 to 4 main benefits that we've found within the offsite construction industry, really. Firstly, I find that offsite construction can greatly speed up the delivery of new homes through both speeding up the build process and minimising delays on site due to bad weather, etc. Offsite construction is ultimately about driving efficiencies within the build process, which aren't possible through traditional build methods. Although speed isn't everything, as we all know, so we need to ensure that we're delivering the best possible standard of homes. At Beattie Passive, we aim to achieve passive house standards a minimum. So all our U values are at 0.11, our air tightness is below 0.6. But to achieve this, we need to ensure that the highest quality build is met. So we do this through standard operating procedures, where all of our Beattie Passive engineers follow these standard operating procedures, and then they're not allowed to move on to the next build stage until a technical supervisor has signed that off to make sure that it's built to the correct requirement. This can't really happen effectively on site, and is a massive benefit of offsite construction. Another major benefit that I see from offsite construction is the ability to give price certainty to our clients on exactly what the house is going to cost. Because we're working in a controlled environment where we're striving to improve efficiencies, we're able to guarantee our price and we'll stick to it. As we're all aware, the current prices in the UK at the moment are spiraling and uncontrollable. So it creates a very difficult environment for the traditional build, where we're finding that we're actually able to stick to our prices and give our clients that certainty. Another benefit that, and I think is probably potentially the most important, will be sort of the move to more, if we're moving to a more net zero transition in the economy, that offsite construction can really benefit through BIM modeling and material optimization. We can minimize waste material. We can also take full loads of materials instead of buying materials in sort of small batches, so we reduce the amount of deliveries. And we're also, at Beattie Passive, we're delivering net zero passive house homes as standard from our factory without any added cost to the client. So that's just a couple of benefits that I see from offsite construction, but I'm sure we'll discuss more throughout this conversation.
Thank you very much, Nathan. That's fantastic. And nice to hear a little bit more about Beattie Passive as well. Sean, good morning. Can I ask you to introduce yourself as well, please?
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name's Sean. I work for Modulous. I'm head of supply chain for Modulous. Been with the business about 2 years now, and I guess worked in the offsite construction industry for about 6 years. So Modulous, for those of you who aren't familiar with the business, we have developed and I guess continue to develop physical and digital technologies that work together, right from feasibility all the way through to delivery on site, making I guess a more efficient, more cost effective, and I guess transparent process. Our physical technology is probably one that people are a bit more familiar with, which is our proprietary kit of parts, which is basically taking all our components into a series of sub-assemblies. Then that's complemented by our digital technology, which is our in-house developed software platform that generates optimized massing schemes. So hopefully that makes sense. We will this morning, I think, touch on a number of topics, but there's a couple that I just wanted to pull out and highlight from my perspective. So firstly, the simplification of procurement and supply chain relationships, obviously a big focus for me. And also product repeatability within controlled manufacturing environments, obviously a real focus for us. Now, our supply chain strategy at Modulous is simple, and that's to make things as simple as we possibly can be. So remove duplication, remove any unnecessary or non-value added margin, and have long-term relationships that deliver both value and innovation. So I think in our industry, there's still plenty of overcomplication within our supply chain that holds us back as an industry. So, for example, the more traditional approach of tendering over partnering as relationship management, I think this limits innovation and limits the sharing of ideas. At Modulous, we're trying to address that, but we want to engage, I guess, more broadly across the industry and collaborate with like-minded people. And how do we share ideas? How do we simplify things? And how do we optimize? Now, we use a decentralized model, which effectively means we're asset light. We don't have our own factory. We partner with our supply chain. We collaborate with them. We innovate with them to deliver these sub-assemblies, repeatable products that I talked about. And that's in a controlled environment. We mitigate risk and ensure quality. And I think quality is a really interesting one. Claire touched on it. As an industry, I think we need to be more vocal about quality control and the benefits this gives us. And it's available today. It's not new news, but it's one, in my view, that we often overlook as an industry in comparison to either cost or design when we talk about offsite construction. So I think it's relevant to today's topic, whilst that's kind of the here and now, and we will obviously touch on the future. I think today as an industry, we have the benefits to deliver, a competitive and compelling offer. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
It does. Thank you very much, Sean. Steve, good morning.
Morning, Keira. Morning, everyone. My name's Steve Chesters. I'm the Commercial Director of the Structural Division at Hadley. Within the Structural Division, we supply a range of products, including purlins, mezzanine sections, SFS systems. We supply components into the modular industry as well, into a lot of leading modular manufacturers. And we also are a contractor of two forms of offsite construction. We have our Hadley frame system, which is a pre-panelized system. We deliver that as a contractor. And we have the Hadley home system, which is an offsite modular housing system. So being in Hadley, we get a very wide view of the offsite industry. We get to interact with clients, with architects, with main contractors, with other suppliers, and we are actually a contractor as well. So we feel the market and its trends up and down from a whole range of areas. The future benefits of offsite construction it's almost a box ticking exercise. Most people can reel off labour, cost efficiency, speed, control, reliability. They're all things that we want from construction, and offsite allows us to achieve that more easily. I think the big conversation really is offsite's still a rapidly expanding market, because construction is still a rapidly expanding market. And offsite construction is a very dynamic form of construction. Really, when you look at the ability to expand and the ability to expand in construction itself, you're looking at what the restrictions are, what's stopping it from being able to expand or be able to expand quickly and be able to react. With offsite, you're taking away a lot of those barriers. You're resetting the norm. You're putting new trends in where the old ones were previously. So if we take labour, if you needed 50 skilled electricians on a large housing site, then if you're taking it into an offsite or modular factory, you're going to need nowhere near that amount. So the labour source is there. And the training of them, the training of that labour is far easier to do in a controlled factory environment where it's repeatable and workable, and the labour doesn't then have to stay there. They can move out into the wider construction environment. So the benefits are massive to the entire supply chain from the top down. So it's a really exciting subject to talk about.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Steve. And last but not least, Proctor Group's Will Jones.
Thank you, Keira. Good morning, everybody. And yeah, really excited to be here for this one. My name is Will Jones. I'm a business development manager for the Proctor Group. And I'm not going to profess to have the knowledge or the expertise of some of these or all of these members on the panel, but obviously I'm really looking forward to seeing where this conversation goes. I was first introduced to Offsite back in about 2005. I was working for a large insulation manufacturer, and there was a large Manchester firm that came down to us, and they were developing student accommodation. They wanted to present to us their product, which was designed for medium and high-rise student accommodation buildings, obviously for universities. And I was just amazed to see how these pods were sort of stacking on top of one another. They maximized space. They had things like foldaway furniture, beds, tables, that sort of thing. And they had a centralized bathroom pod system, which I thought was brilliant. It was simple, effective, and to me quite revolutionary, being probably still very young in the industry then. It focused on space, environment, and the economy with regards to obviously making sure they're economically viable. And as student accommodation, hotels, offices, I thought brilliant, absolutely great idea. But I always got the feeling that for housing, people would want more flexibility and design and that type of thing. And I've seen the offsite building industry grow so much since I've been in the industry for the last sort of 19, 20 years. from pre-insulated panels in timber frame companies to SIPs to finished panelized systems to full volumetric. And for the last 12 months at the Proctor Group, my focus has been to try and understand as best as possible the offsite industry in the UK and how the products and the ranges that we as a company can provide, hopefully, these potential customers, and what sort of problems and issues they may have. As a supplier of construction membranes, acoustic flooring, high performance insulation, it's really important that we understand not just how to build them, but how they're designed, and obviously understanding how we can sort of add value. What the exact requirements are, I guess, is where I'm getting at. And we know these may differ from customer to customer, but they also may be very universal as well. How do we mitigate condensation, improve air tightness, protect the finished product from water ingress, UV, transportation, that type of thing. And from visiting many manufacturing facilities over the last sort of few years, designers, drawers, installers, it kind of opened my eyes into what's truly achievable by the offsite sector, and how it can not only improve the construction industry, but also, you know, the economies of it, the spatial of it, the timings of the installs and the building, but most of all, in my opinion, performance. And I hope that obviously there's going to be a lot of focus on performance today, but I see performance is so important for offsite, and I generally feel that right now we've got a great foundation in the UK for the offsite construction, and I can see it only heading in one direction.
I can agree more, Will. Thank you very much. Okay, so just for the audience, we have a number of questions coming in on the YouTube feed, also via email. I have 3 or 4 already, so please keep posting and we will get to them. So just for the panelists, obviously I'll ask you, and sorry, I meant to say for the audience watching, if you have a question for a specific panel member, please mention their name. I can already see one in here for Nathan, so feel free, they won't be offended if the others aren't asked, so please just pop their name in there. If the panel, and if you have something to add to something else that one of the panelists have answered, please just pop your hand up and I'll come to you, and obviously you can chip in on if you have an addition that you'd like to add to their question. So Claire, if I can start with you, please. You spoke about opportunity in your introduction. Repeatability has got to play a big part in that. Can you just expand a little bit for us on that, please?
Yeah, repeatability is key. Every time we start a new project, on a traditional build, we seem to start from scratch. Repeatability allows us to learn what went well, what didn't, and why. It allows us to shore up supply chains, which we've already touched on, and that's by consistently ordering the same parts. I mean, as an example, I will do an angle support, and we try and standardize these components throughout a contract, so that if we're ordering 50 by 50 angle, they know they've got a good supply, because quite often we'll have designers that will do a 50 by 50 and a 40 by 60. Now, if that can be fed in as a standard, then all of a sudden, instead of fabricators making all of these unique bespoke angles, not dissimilar to the rails, the rails that we supply on for support, the SFS type rails, then we can have them on the shelf. They're there ready and available to us all. So that's positive. I'm sure at Proctor, your model would fail if you had to design your product for every build, and you've created a factory and it's allowed you to innovate, etc. If we push that on a stage by putting in guidelines and repeatability, it gives everybody the opportunity to sort of take that type of modelled approach. And the main thing is, especially in recent history, is showing up those supply chains.
Thank you very much, Claire. So just coming to the YouTube feed here, Nathan, Simon has asked, how does the off-sector try and move away from, I'm sorry, give me 1 second. Yeah, that's what she's one. How does the off-site sector try and move away from the outdated belief that modular buildings are copy and paste and therefore repetitive?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I think inherently we want to kind of have a copy and paste structure, but actually the internal layout within the buildings and the actual external facades can be completely different on every other unit. So effectively, modular construction is limited by the size that you can transport it. So you will have, your modules are likely to be 4.3 meters wide, and then they can be up to 12, 15 meters long. So effectively, you've got lots of these boxes that are going to be standardized, and will be the same, but actually the end finish and the internal layout can be completely different. So it's about, yes, the boxes are the same, but actually the finished product will be very different at the end of it.
Thank you. And Nathan, just while I've got you here and you're unmuted, Simon, another different Simon, this is what was confusing me, two different questions from two different Simons, has asked, how do the cost of your passive houses compare to those built using traditional on-site methods?
It's actually really interesting. We've been doing some cost studies with Derek Goff Associates, who are based in Manchester and London. And for the last 2 to 3 years, probably we've been doing it, and we have been more expensive, probably 10 to 15% more expensive than traditional build. But now with the rising costs of traditional build, we're actually finding that we're comparable, and in some places we're actually coming out cheaper than traditional build, which I don't think many modular companies could ever say that they have been at that case till now. So it's a massive shift where we are actually comparable, or if not cheaper, and also delivering passive house net zero products. So delivering a lot better product for the same or less cheaper.
Interesting, very interesting. Steve, what sort of savings can be made by engaging a design team earlier in the process?
Well, we have an in-house design team, engineering and detailing, and obviously we're part of the wider design team with the principal engineer and the architects, depending on which system we're looking at. I sit as a commercial director, and the biggest thing for me, and the biggest thing for really bottom line across construction, is net profit. So everything you've got to look at is net profit. And the predictability, you need to understand your costs as early as possible, absolutely as early as possible. You need a strong, reliable budget. And then you need to be able to control the variations of those costs which are outside of your contract sum. And those two things really are the lifeblood of any construction project. When you're engaging early with Offsite, with your design team, you're giving yourself the absolute best opportunity to firstly understand that budget very early and then be able to control it. Building in an offsite environment is very repeatable, so the designs are very repeatable. We can control that very early on. The design team can identify those factors that are going to affect cost, and drive them down, or hopefully eradicate them completely. We can look at things that might become a factor later on. And really, it was all coming back to cost and ways of avoiding costs and places you're going to get tripped up within a project.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. Question from Greg here. Maybe I can direct this one to you, Sean, because we haven't spoken to you yet. How does a decentralized business model ensure speedy and controlled product delivered to market?
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Keira. Yeah, I guess as I mentioned, we do operate on a decentralized model, which effectively means, as I say, we don't have our own factory. But by working with our supplier partners, so we've got I guess a real core supplier partner network. That means that we can manufacture and deliver these key sub-assemblies that make up our modules. And it means that we can have product delivered and ready for assembly that doesn't then require cutting or adapting or building or, I guess, amending when it hits the assembly facility. We know that the sub-assemblies are assembled and go through numerous QC checks and testing before they hit the assembly facility. So we know that we're addressing any issues a lot earlier on in the process. And that gives us, I guess, confidence that, I guess, by addressing these areas, that we can deliver a speedier assembly process and ultimately, I guess, a speedier deployment to site. And I think by testing and observing and checking specification earlier in the process, which is what we try and do, and and work with our supplier partners on that, we've got greater confidence further downstream or upstream within the project delivery. And I talked about quality, I think is a theme that's coming out a bit here, and I talked about in my introduction. if we can shout about it and demonstrate it and have confidence in it by working with supplier partners in collaboration, I think that can only benefit us as an industry overall.
Thank you very much. Now, there's a general comment here. I wonder if we can discuss this. Ensign Designs asks, can we have a discussion around insurance and mortgages for MMC bespoke and mass housing? Is that something that the panel could contribute to? Anyone here experienced in that?
Yeah,
I know. Oh, sorry. Go on, you go, Nathan.
Go, Claire, that's fine.
I was going to say I've come across this, and I know that there's insurance within our industry is a problem, as we all know anyway. And I remember just post Grenfell sitting around a table with an insurance company and asking them about how we can deal with this, and they actually raised the issue of offsite construction at that time, and they said that insurers weren't that keen to insure offsite in our country, although overseas it was common. This was probably 3 years ago, maybe. Well, no, it'd be 5 years because it's 5-year anniversary. And then, because I've been part of the Construction Innovation Hub, it's a question that I keep asking, and it is quite relevant because I still haven't had a clear and concise answer. But to be honest, our industry, nobody wants to give us a clear and concise answer anyway. But yes, I understand where that question's come from, because I still am finding that we need to be engaging conversations with the insurance companies and the mortgage societies around the table. Sorry, Nathan, do you want to expand on your actual experience?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it's an issue for self-builders, or that kind of where it's sort of a smaller entity. We've found issues when some of our partners have tried to get mortgages and have gone to sort of a smaller company. But we haven't actually found any. I think we've delivered about 450 homes now. I think around about 300 to 400 of them are mortgageable or have been mortgaged. So we haven't really found the issue. I think there is hesitancy within the industry, and there is work to be done around offsite construction. Is not new, and it's a greater way of delivering houses to a better standard. And I think that just needs to be relayed correctly to the insurers. But insurers are very risk averse, as we all know, and they don't like change. So I think it will take time to really get them on board.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I know personally there are specialist mortgage brokers and advisors out there, as you say, that do smaller, certainly for the self-build market. Okay, just coming back to some work. They're coming thick and fast and via email, so please bear with me. We have one here around preclusion of some traditional materials. So the question is, does offsite construction preclude some traditional materials such as bricks and roof tiles? I'm trying to think who to direct that at. Nathan, probably again, because I guess you're in the design stage of your.
I can answer that. No, it doesn't. It's completely client dependent on what you'd like to use, really. Yes, we're not doing the modular aspect with bricks, but we can install brick slips, or on site a brick skin can be built around it. Obviously that's increasing costs, and where cost is tight, we'd probably try and steer you away from doing a whole new brick skin or brick slips, but yes, it can be done. And then traditional tiles, there's no issue with those. They can be installed within the factory, or they can be installed on site once the modules are actually in place. So no, you can still use traditional materials. There's obviously just sometimes a cost to bricks. Yes, and availability at times.
Yeah, go ahead, that's okay, Keira. Got to remember that offsite isn't just modular. There's a whole load of offsite solutions out there that will apply to different projects. You just got to be selecting the right one for what you need. And as Nathan mentioned, offsite's not new. Timber frame has been going up for years, since 70s. So we've got steel frame systems that have been going since the 80s in panelized offsite construction. It's just about different methods and adapting some things that are new and some things that are old, and blending them together.
Thank you very much, Steve. Maybe you can comment on this as well, Steve. Simon said, given the positivity from the panel around offsite construction, why do we think that the uptake from the construction sector is still relatively small? And critically, what can we do about it?
I was talking about this the other day. There's a whole range of reasons for that. Some of it is visibility. So again, if we're talking about modular or we're talking about offsite, we've been doing like student accommodation and hotels in panelized systems for a long time. And timber frame, like I mentioned earlier, that's been around forever, and roof trusses are offsite, and bathroom pods. There's a whole load of elements that have been around for ages. So some of it's just understanding what's actually visible there in the market. Some things with construction, and from my background on the commercial side, estimating projects and then QSing projects and managing projects, sometimes it's time. Cost is always a big driver. People are worried about cost, and you can engage in a project or a new element or a new component, and people will be going down that road and thinking they've got loads of time to do it. And then when it comes to placing an order, which is always late getting an order to put something out, and they run out of time and there isn't time to get in what they want, or they still haven't understood it enough, you fall back on what you know, and that can be a different form of construction. So it's just people understanding the options that are out there, working as early as possible for taking into all the aspects that need to be considered for a project, and then moving it forwards. But really, education's still got to be done with the market so that people understand what's available.
The other, sorry, I was going to say the other driver is on the Construction Innovation Hub. They've done a whole feasibility study on this with government. So they've spoken to government, they've spoken to all the departments, and they've said there's a £40 billion pipeline of requirement coming through from government, and there will be a directive that part of that will need to be apportioned to Offsite. So I think it's not just the mood of the general time. I think government is seeing this as an opportunity, seeing the benefits, because we know that sites, it's again that word quality, and we need to add quality. Post the Hackett review, she's identified quality is an issue, and building on site reduces that ability to bring in that quality control. So I think that's one of the factors. But with government, like always, it was like BIM, they needed to intervene to get that momentum and that sort of carrot for industry to step up to the mark.
Sean, did you have something to add there?
I was just, sorry, hopefully not take the conversation back too far, but just a question to Steve, when you mentioned about cost, do you find that those cost conversations are purely focused on material, or are people looking at it in a more broader overall project delivery when considering cost, in your experience?
Yeah, that's a real key question, Sean. We'd like people to look at the overall cost. I'm sure everyone here would agree that if you're going to look at the actual cost, especially of modular, but really of anything with offsite, you need to look at the benefits across the full duration of the project. Whether if you're saving time in the ground, saving complete total program time, it needs to be viewed as costs in a whole. But very typically, you're just taking a small snapshot of what that cost is, a small element, and comparing one element against another element, and that's not always the most accurate way of making the cost comparison.
Thank you very much. Will, we haven't spoken to you for a while, so I'm going to come to a question here from Marina, because it's about construction membranes, which is what we do. With regards to the use of construction membranes, are there any common issues you have come across within offsite manufacturing? Okay.
Yeah, I think as previously mentioned, the general performance of offsite manufacturing is quite high. You can get good air tightness and condensation control they're both quite achievable. The main concerns probably with trying to get a continuation on a membrane would be the detailing, where you potentially got, say, two panels adjoining on site, or where you're bolting two modules together. And They're also hard to treat areas. We've found things like sky hooks when you're trying to lift the modules up. And obviously, potentially these are penetrating either out from the roof or the wall, and potentially penetrating your external line in that instance. So what we're trying to create is a continuation for both the vapor control layer and the breathable membrane, depending on maybe where the air tightness is as well. Obviously, that's got to be taken into account. So detailing is obviously a massive, there's got to be a massive emphasis put on that, ideally at design stage, and how you're going to go about that within the factory, if it's being done in the factory, how you need to do your remediations on site, if it can't be done in the factory because the likes of obviously craning on, that type of thing. But another thing we've come across is exposure. If the membrane is being used to potentially wrap a panel or a module or whatever it might be, and then it's being left outside, not always because it wants to be left outside, but because maybe there's been some unavoidable circumstances. We've seen sort of modules and panels be left outside, exposed to direct sunlight, rain, for long periods of time. So we have to think about moisture ingress, UV protection, making sure that, obviously, again, as mentioned, the hard to treat areas such as the details don't become compromised. If they haven't been detailed correctly, you could have issues with the likes of moisture ingress if it's exposed to inclement weather. So again, it's just making sure that the products are being used as suitable, obviously for the detailing and the design of the building, and obviously how that product is going to be stored. And unfortunately, sometimes we do see them left outside for long periods of time, and we have seen membranes degrade because they've maybe not been designed to do that. One last thing I could think of off the top of my head would be transportation. So again, if your membrane is going to be exposed on a module or a panel as it's being sort of transported down the motorway, it's obviously going to be exposed to some quite strong winds that could damage the membrane, tear, rip it, that sort of thing. Which again, then you're going to have to look to replace or repair any damage before any on-site work commences. And, from my experience, the idea is to try and get as much as you can done off-site and not have to worry about some of the detailing that obviously you don't want to be doing on site, so we can crack on with obviously getting the product finished.
Absolutely, you don't be taking it off the lorry and patching it up.
No.
Before you crack on. Well, I've had an email here from Rob. The new Part L BRE report is designed to close the performance gap by requiring installers to prove they've maintained installation continuity and achieved a quality installation on site with photographic evidence required. Will this also apply to off-site construction? If so, this has the potential to make off-site manufactured systems much easier for building control to evaluate and sign off if they arrive on site. That's something you're familiar with?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, obviously, and this is, I guess, the thing, people feel that the modular offsite, whatever you want to call it, is different, to traditional, which of course it is maybe in the way that we manufacture the products, but they've still got to comply with building regulations. So there's no difference there. I feel it should be easier to comply, especially with the likes of building in a factory, for instance. You've got more control. It's easier to then perhaps come and assess what's being done in a factory. You're not worrying about, obviously, types of, again, I mentioned inclement weather, potential timescales. There's a lot more control and timings for offsite manufacture as well. So I can only see that really improving that sort of as designed to as built on site. So obviously what we're looking to design and what we're actually getting from the finished product. I think that's a massive benefit of offsite manufacture, that we can close that gap.
Thank you very much. Ensign Designs asked a couple of questions here. So are you, as modular manufacturers, able to control the amount of plastic packaging used on site and suppliers to you, i.e. how do you address plastic waste in the supply chain? And similarly, do you calculate embodied carbon for each project as we move towards net zero? So again, I'm looking for volunteers here if anyone has any particular experience. Nathan?
Yeah, I'll answer it. I think packaging is a huge issue, and we certainly aren't where we want to be yet with the amount of single-use plastic that we receive from packaging for pallets, etc. And that's something that we are trying to work with our suppliers, and it's something they're keen to do. But there's obviously a cost to that and how we get around that. So yes, single-use plastic is still a problem. We don't use single-use plastic when we're transporting our modules. We've got heavy-duty PVC covers that can last up to 20 or 30 trips. So those are more expensive, but we feel that it doesn't fit with our ethos to have single-use plastic and shrink wrap our modules while we're transporting them. And regarding embodied carbon, yeah, we do embodied carbon calculations on pretty much every development that we do. And as we are passive house as kind of standard, we're finding that our embodied carbon is around about 50% less than traditional build, but then our whole life carbon is massively better. Our operational carbon is 96% better than traditional build. So that's where the massive benefit is. The embodied carbon, there's still carbon in the construction process, but actually operationally, we find that because our heating demand is down to below 20 kilowatt per hours, and we've got MVHR, which is continuously using that energy, we're finding that, yeah, our operational carbon is, yeah, about 96% better than traditional build.
Okay. Sean or Steve, anything to add around the sort of embodied carbon and net zero side of things?
I was going to just mention around single-use plastic. So I think it's interesting what Nathan says around, obviously we're all striving for eliminating that single-use plastic in all parts of the supply chain, but I think there's that real balance of how do you protect your product in transit. Now when we move our modules around, we rely on the Proctor product, and that's serving us well. But I think when you're moving around the sub-assemblies like we are through the supply chain, ultimately you try and design that so it sits within or fits within a standard lorry footprint, that therefore you can protect it within a normal lorry protection curtain, whatever it might be. But I think that, again, to Nathan's point, that bit around the balance of cost versus the drive to remove single-use plastic is a topic that I think a lot of businesses are battling with, especially when there's a real focus on cost at every point. And the point or the question I raised to Steve around the total cost of the product, at some point that's going to get paid for. And I think if we can work together as within the industry to think of ideas, and we're collaborating with our logistics partners to try and find ways to package products so they don't need those single-use plastics. So yeah, I recognise it's a real challenge, and something I think we've just got to keep sharing ideas on, because it's not something we should protect, I don't think, as in our ideas.
Yeah, there's Hadley are essentially a cold rolled steel manufacturer. So we take cold rolled steel coil and use that to manufacture the sections that we're either selling into the industry or using within our own modular or panelized builds. And some of what Nathan was saying is really interesting, and big drivers for where we are now. It's not just about the product as it is now and the amount of carbon in that product, essentially, that you're building, or that construction of that product, but the whole life, and that's really where we're looking at. And a lot of the more modern products that we're using and are used in Offsite by its nature, are making the structures themselves more recyclable when it comes to end of life. And in a lot of cases, there's large elements that are reusable as well, which is becoming more and more important to that whole embodied carbon calc.
Claire, did you have something to add to this discussion here?
Yeah, again, it's the repeatability element of this. Yes, what Sean said is if you can all learn from each other, but if you learn from project to project, what arrives on site completely undamaged and what doesn't, and start to collect data from these builds to then take forward to your next build over time. Hopefully we can learn from our builds. At the moment with construction, sort of standard construction, we can't do that because it's different every time. And with the government drive, so we've got to reduce embodied carbon by 40% by 2030, net zero by 2050. We've got no choice. We really do need to start making these decisions and changes. But I do feel that the only way that we can do that is by this repeatability and this learning. There's also the opportunity to use some of the delivery items as part of the build. And I know I've been working on some projects where, I don't know, they'll use something else in the build, maybe something that they're going to use internally or on a playground or something like that, that remains on the site and becomes part of the site. And again, it's learning from what's left over to then lose this single-use plastic and reduce this embodied carbon as we move forward to hit those goals.
So if I can just add a little bit of an extra question, Clare, one that we've had via email. So Paul said, so waste and sustainability are important topics at the moment. Where can we see significant improvements when we look at offsite versus traditional? Is that something you can comment a little more on for us?
Yeah, so waste and sustainability are, well, sustainability for me, as I think Will touched on, isn't just about the build, it's about the operation of the building as well. The building's quality is improved and then performance improves. This reduces emissions, which then has a direct relationship with the running costs. We should be testing our buildings. There's no denying that. We shouldn't just be relying on photos and dates. We should know what our buildings are doing, and we now have the technology to do these sort of things. When it comes to waste, I would imagine in a factory environment, you've got a lot more control over waste than you do on site. I mean, the one that always jumps to mind with me is flashings. Flashings coming 3 metre lengths, doors are 100 high. We've always got a 900mm offcut. Now, if you're in a factory, it's easy for you to think, well, that 900 offcut for a jam can be used, I don't know, for a vent opening or something like that. It allows you to really optimize what you do with your waste. Whereas on site, if I'm detailing a job, I have to put myself, when I'm scheduling materials, in the mind of the person on the site. Are they really going to run around the site to find a little bit of 900 offcut to use for that small piece of, that small opening? It's very doubtful. Even if I mark it on a drawing saying, please use this here, they might be working on 2 revisions earlier. So for me, it's those marginal gains that will make a big difference over time. So I think there's a big amount to learn from the sustainability element, but also managing our waste. And I know we're talking about off-site, but do we really mean controlled environments? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be off-site. You could have off-site, on-site. You could create your own area. So I just wanted to clarify that a lot of these savings don't mean that you've got to transport your materials from 100 miles down the motorway. It might be that you've got a patch of land that's 10 miles around the corner or something like that, or the playground on a development you've got a big sort of marquee or something, I'm not sure. But let's not get too hung up on the off-site. I think it's the control element that's important that will allow us to look at sustainability, quality and waste.
Yeah, I think I really agree with that, Claire. We've kind of sort of echoed a lot of what you're saying there. With our sort of partners that we have, we've set up flying factories where they will actually just set up a factory on the site to then manufacture the studs and components. And so it's you can use local employment, local labour within that actual site. But all you're doing is creating a controlled environment where you're creating these sticks, studs, panels, whatever they will be, local to site. So it doesn't have to be miles away in the north of England or in Norfolk or wherever it's going to be. It will be localized to the site, bringing that controlled environment and giving benefits to the wider economy.
I mean, controlled environment as well is going back to maybe you've got an off-site fixed location. It's got to be better for the employment. You've got then people that you can employ locally that go to one place that aren't traveling all around the country and being exposed to all the elements. So one, you've got a consistent workforce. So we're talking about repeatability and skills. So those are going to be improved. But you've also got a better working environment for them. They're not exposed, because we worry about the materials being exposed to the elements. We've also got the workforce. Surely on a cold day or a really wet, windy day, your quality is going to be compromised. So again, that's another little win for the off-site or sort of offering, I think.
Absolutely. Sean?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, as part of our model as a business, the local assembly really, really ticks a lot of boxes with us, and that's what we're working towards is working with, we don't want to be shipping big volumetric modules hundreds of miles around the country. It's about reducing that last leg, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, again, to Nathan and Claire's point, using local labour, training them up to assemble modules that are effectively, as I say, a kit of parts that's quite it's not complicated. It's clearly there's big heavy product within there, but it's hopefully simplified as much as possible. You get more engagement with local authorities, etc. By being able to employ local people. So yeah, I think that ticks a lot of boxes, and not only with on the labour side and reducing the amount of mileage you do, but also from a carbon footprint, I guess, as well.
Great point. And you guys have amazingly just answered what I thought was a great question from Bob Eden via email, who'd said, offsite construction obviously limits design through and practicalities of delivering complete units through the mayhems of the UK road network, any scope for hybrid solutions on site with some traditional skills, and any technical problems here during the two activities. So I feel like you guys have just completely answered his question. So a good job. A general question here from Paul Kyle just in, and I will go back through the previous one, so please don't leave if you've asked a different question. Do the panel believe that the number of projects requiring passive house requirements will significantly increase over the next few years compared to net zero requirements in off-site projects? Nathan, I wonder if you're best placed to answer that one with your experience in the passive house sector.
Yeah, I think there is a drive to passive house, and I think it's probably to achieve passive house standards a bit more clear than achieving net zero. Everyone's kind of got a different opinion of what net zero is, whether it's in operation or whether it's in build, or how that's actually created, where passive house is a set of principles, set of standards that you either achieve them or you're not. So it's a bit more defined, I think, in how that's created. And there is a massive drive. I think Scotland are going to try and make all their buildings passive house standard. We're seeing a lot more inquiries than we ever have, which is really promising. And to try and achieve that in an off-site manner is difficult, but it is achievable, and it's making sure you design correctly, test correctly, to make sure that they're achieved. But yeah, we're finding that there is definitely an increased drive towards passive house.
Okay, thank you. A question we've had in from Colin. Steve, perhaps I can direct this one to you. How can off-site construction help us achieve our sustainability targets?
Sustainability is something that the panel has been talking about quite a lot this morning. There's so many elements to that, and keep coming back to repeatability. The repeatability and the predictability of what we're doing. That's probably the main driver of it, because it helps us slim down on all other aspects of the job. Claire was just saying about materials and wastage within a factory. That is absolutely mind-blowing, the control in a factory environment compared to traditional construction and on-site. If you took one element like fixings within panelised or modular construction, not only do you know how many are being used, but you know what type are being used and where they are within the factory at any time. And you can control it to the level that if there's a fixing left somewhere, then you can stop that production and know that that needed to be included somewhere else. So that's a great level of control. If you go around any traditional site, there's buckets of fixings all over the place, and you never really know how many are going to be used in the job. You can never accurately cost it in there. With the estimating doing their chief guesswork at the start of the projects, they can say there'll be 1,000 fixings in here based on the square meterage, and you probably use 2 or 3 times that and have no idea where they went. And that knocks on to all elements of that construction. It's just greater control. The more that you know what you're doing, you know the labour element that's going into it, you know the transport element that's going into it, so you know the fuel that's going into the transport and the coverage that those vehicles are doing. You know the time spent by the design team designing it, so you know the hours that they're doing backwards and forwards to their office. It's just a massive amount of control compared to a process where control isn't able to be achieved because there are so many elements outside of the control, whether it's the different subcontractors involved in that, or the durations that they're in a project, or the effects on a project, like weather has always traditionally been a big effect of construction projects that you can't control. But I think what the last 2 years have really shown all of us is that being able to predict things is extremely difficult. Having a global pandemic hit us, and then the situation in the Ukraine afterwards, just global logistics of components has been horrific. And you 1 month it will look fine, the next month it's completely different. So all of these impact on sustainability. And having that greater level of control on that helps you have a greater level on the sustainability that you're returning.
Claire.
Can I just jump on Steve's point there? I think you made an excellent point about, I know it's fixings, but everybody gives fixings not the credit they need. We haven't actually touched on safety. If you're in a controlled environment, I know from site, yes, there's always fixings left over, and they use the fixings that they find, quite often in the wrong instance. Now, as a detailer and a designer, I've gone to the efforts of getting calculations, etc., done to say that needs to be fixed at certain centres, etc., etc. In a controlled environment, you've got the opportunity to make sure that's being followed through. And then taking it to another level, we've got things like the BS 8414 tests and all various component tests and built-up tests that we need to do. We're doing repeatability, especially in a panelized approach. We really can have confidence in the panel that's going to site does reflect the data that's on that that report, that safety sheet, whether it's fixing calcs, whether it's fire, whatever. You can give that assurance that you as manufacturers already do when your products are leaving the factory. But when they're being put together, last thing on a Friday night, with the storms coming in over the weekend, who knows? It brings in that quality and safety element, because we haven't touched on the structural side of things. So I think that's, and you mentioning fixings really made me think about that.
I think that's a really interesting point, Claire. Well picked up and good contribution there. Well, I'm going to jump back to one that I missed earlier. I was just going through the YouTube feed there. One from Daniel: should ground gas protection be a consideration at manufacturing stage?
Yeah, it should always be something that's obviously thought about. I think that normally you find that ground gas is dealt with by whoever's looking after the groundworks package. With ground gas, what's important here is to have a continuous or homogeneous membrane that can fully protect the building and its inhabitants. And obviously the main issue, if we think of the likes, say, of a floor cassette, you're going to have junction details when they're put together, say on site. If you're trying to apply, which I guess is probably where the question's going, if you're trying to apply a ground gas membrane to a floor cassette in a factory and then deliver that to site, you've then got a junction detail to worry about on obviously a very, very important health and safety product. So I'd say yes, it should always be considered at design stage, it should always be considered at manufacture, but you need to make sure that when whatever's obviously going to be delivered to site and finished on site is going to be able to function for its main purpose. I would add that it makes sense to look at the likes of radon barriers and ground gas barriers on every single project you look at. I do think it's a little bit strange how we sort of select where these are installed. I don't know how much control we have over the movement of ground gas in hundreds of years of time, but I think it's something that probably isn't considered enough. But yeah, I'd certainly say consider, but make sure whatever's obviously going to be delivered to site has to be able to be obviously suitable, and you want that continuous membrane. So with the likes of floor cassettes and modules, I don't think we've got a great solution for that as yet, but that doesn't mean that we're not around the corner from creating one.
Thank you. We have a tweet here, says, please ask Sean, what does supply chain optimization mean to Modulous?
Yeah, good question. I guess in one word, digitalization, not the easiest word to say, but I guess then that might be a bit alien to some, especially in comparison, I guess, to the traditional market. But I guess what it means, to simplify it, what that means is digitizing our supply chain, or generating transparency, accountability, and gives us, I guess, what we love the whole industry to have is greater visibility on lead times and supply performance, and giving us the information to make greater decisions. So, to Steve's point around fixings, having all that controlled and not necessarily, worrying about it, and a system that automates it for you means that you can focus on, I guess, more important things, dare I say it, but it also gives us greater visibility of price volatility, which again, in the market, again, which Steve mentioned around the Ukraine and COVID, etc., gives us that earlier visibility. And from on a day-to-day basis, what does digitization mean? I think it means that we can share our product pipeline, forecast, schedules, which you wouldn't typically get, I guess, at the granular level within the traditional world. And that's all basics that we need to make a manufacturing process work. And as I say, we can automate some of that, and allows us to focus on the value add bits. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. It's about digitizing as much of it as we can.
Thank you very much. Nathan, if I can come back to you, Charles has asked, how do you avoid to deal with overheating in passive house buildings?
Yeah, so there is overheating. It can be a concern in passive house buildings, but it's about designing correctly from the outset. So as soon as we get a project, we carry out a passive house planning package, a PHPP, and that will determine whether there's any chance of overheating. And if there is, we can look at putting shading on the building, putting your windows setting your windows further back within the envelope. We can also, what we like to do with a lot of our modular stuff is, because it's generally fully relocatable and could be moved once it's been located, it could be moved to a different site. We like to use sun tint windows, which then stops the solar glare and the amount of heat that's attracted from the sun, so that, yeah, you don't get as much overheating.
Fantastic. And is that something that you've experienced in any of your projects or had any issues with, or have you managed to mitigate any issues?
We haven't had any issues with overheating as of yet, thankfully. Yeah, it's all about planning and designing at the early stage to make sure that doesn't happen. But generally, in a passive house, you should be living at 21 degrees all year round is the key. Obviously, in very high temperature conditions, it can rise slightly, but you need to do night purging, where you open all your windows at night to let the building cool down. But yeah, there are ways to counteract it.
Okay. Claire, Jen has asked for you specifically, how does Claire see the benefits of offsite changing the relationship with suppliers?
Again, it goes back to what we were saying before. Repeatability would allow the shoring up of a supply chain. So if we are in a position to predict what we need well in advance, then the supply chain can react to that. Or if we find a commonality, we can create standard components. As I've spoken about your company, and you wouldn't design it. It's happening with rainwater goods. Well, rainwater goods for a long time have moved towards standard component parts, whereas when I first started, I was designing and drawing each individual part of a rainwater pipe. With the recent shortages, I'm part of the metal at the MCRMA, and we discuss shortages all the time. So what they're doing is they're bulk buying sheets of metal, but they still don't know what the demand is going to be, what length of panels, what profile. So it doesn't ease the strain, because just before Christmas, I'm having contracts land that they want the schedules say it comes in on a Thursday, they want the schedules by the Tuesday, and then the drawings can follow whenever they want. So although the manufacturers are bulk ordering the raw material, they still don't know what the demand is going to be. And that's what we need to try and shore up, is these repeatable items that can be standard components. And if we look at I keep talking about a platform approach, a kit of parts, if you know that the middle of your building is usually pretty consistent, so you know right from the start we need 10 of those particular types, then your manufacturer knows I need to be starting to manufacture all the component parts for those. When you do a traditional build, you don't have that heads up. You've got no idea. It is pretty much guesswork. And it's a big black cloud hanging over people like me that you think, is there an area have I missed? Is there, have I overordered? And are they going to change something? So I think that's what's going to happen. It's going to help. It's also going to help the supply chain innovate. I mean, Will was talking earlier on that, you know, we'll come up with something for that, because you know what the challenges are. You've got guidelines in place and you can innovate around that. And when we talk about innovation, we talk about systems as well. You can innovate your systems to work better. So I'm talking about a job landing on Thursday and me having to put the order in on the Tuesday. Well, it might be the architect already knows what the material is because the standard component parts are digitalized. They've created their own schedule right from the start, and I haven't got all those worries. So I think it's certainly a good way to shore up the supply chains, because at the moment everything is so unpredictable.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire. I'm going to come back to a question that I missed earlier. I often do that, so bear with me. Barry had asked, and I'm going to open this up for the panel, CLTs would like to gain benefits of offsite manufacture, e.g. by leasing space over council car parks. Who is willing to go this way for local communities? So by CLTs, I think he means community land trusts. Is that something that any of the panel know a little bit about and would be able to answer, Barry? No, so silence is a good answer. So Barry, sorry, I don't think we quite know the answer to that one. So we'll need to maybe all go away and do a little bit more research on that. So
do you want to repeat the question again? I might be able to answer it.
Yeah, it's on the YouTube feed. So he says CLTs, and I think he means community land trust rather than what we think of a CLT, which was confusing me, would like to gain benefits of offsite manufacture. So perhaps by leasing space over council car parks. Who's willing to go this way? So I guess, you know, is there benefits of offsite manufacturers in perhaps unusual areas that council own, for example?
Yeah, I think absolutely. We're pricing a couple of schemes that are very similar, actually. Okay. Are trying to utilise that meanwhile developments as such. So there might be a space of land on a car park that we could utilise for, say, 3 to 4 years, and then after that we could actually move the modules and put them somewhere else where the housing need is. Okay. So I think there is definitely benefits to it. We're very much keen to be involved in those kind of schemes. We recently did one at Ferry Road, which is 50 apartments at an old gasworks in Cardiff, and they probably will stay there, but they're designed that they can be completely dismantleable, taken down, and then moved on to where the housing need is. So sort of reimagining and reimagine how a standard house is that has more than one life, I guess, and can be moved on to different areas of the country.
Interesting. And how does that work, just for my own interest, how does that work? And how do you make the structure movable in terms of do you have sort of portable foundations, or how does that work? Yeah,
what we've done is, on this site anyway, is that we've laid spreader beams on top of the existing ground, and we've basically laid it on a DPM and put hooking eyes in. So that once we actually move all of our modules out, they can be craned out again. We can then get cranes to then lift up the spreader beams, the foundations, and then move them on to the next site. I mean, there's obviously certain things that you can't move, but yeah, in the majority, you'll try and move and use everything that you've used on the previous site.
Okay, fantastic. So I have around 4 or 5 questions and a couple more coming in. Just a final few coming in. So if you have any more, please ask them now, because I know these panelists are very busy people, and we're thanking them for their time so far. So we'll go ahead with the last few, if that's okay. Steve, what type of products benefit from MMC and which are unsuitable?
Well, first, it's going to depend on what MMC we're talking about. There's so many types, and there's really a solution for every problem. So, for example, on panelized systems, we've done residential, hospitals, care homes, hotels. There's a whole range of markets that you could use. But probably in as many as that we've delivered projects within those, we've also will have turned them down for being unsuitable. So you've really got to look at what is the driver for the project, and what type of offsite manufacture do I want to be looking at, which will suit it best. And you might end up with one or two options. And it's not always what you think. It's not always cost. Sometimes it's program, sometimes it's logistics. You need to find what suits best for that project that you want to deliver. So it's those early discussions and understanding the full brief and not coming straight back to price. There's probably other things that you want to look at that are going to knock on to price and the most appropriate form. For example, we've had one once where the program is actually too long for offsite. If you're not going to be able to deliver it fast enough and the return on the investment isn't the driving point, then it's probably not going to be the most suitable type of construction for it. So I would have said that there's probably a fit for every project. You just got to look at what type of construction is going to be there, even if it's just bathroom pods or an offsite element, a roof truss or something in there. But as we were saying earlier, and as Claire was saying very eloquently, it's the safety, the predictability, any element that you can move off of the variable site environment into a controlled offsite environment is going to benefit the project. So there's probably a space for something offsite or something MMC within every project.
Fantastic. I'm just going back to our Twitter messages here, and they're often a little bit more direct. So Claire has talked a lot about repeatability. Doesn't that just give us loads of buildings that look the same, Claire?
It could, but is that a problem? I've been watching Grand Designs the Street. I think it's a Vista development where everybody's given their own plot and they can build whatever they want. And at the start of the bit of the programme, they pan out and show an overview, and it looks a higgledy-piggledy mess. And then I look at my favourite cities, Edinburgh, Bath, Cheltenham, and these rows of Edwardian terraces that are all repeatable buildings that look beautiful with the same windows, or a consistent different versions of the same building. I think we get too hung up on holiday parks, and holiday parks are an evolution of caravans, and that was for a purpose. It was short stay holidays and it's suited. When we look at homes, once we get this, if we get this nailed, then the design element can be, right, let's look at what really looks good. Let's look at quality components, not cheap, easy parts. So I think, and it was funny, I was thinking about this with the copy and paste question at the beginning. What's wrong with copy and paste? You know, there's no, and again, it goes back to that repeatability. If something works, you know it works, you've got good data, why not stick to it? We do it with cars, aeroplanes, everything. It's a similar model with a different version, and it works. We seem to be the only industry that pushes against it. So give me your Edwardian terrace house any day over your street self-builds. That's my answer.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you.
Can I jump in there, Keira, actually?
Sure.
I mean, I again, I totally agree with Claire. She with regards to repeatability, it's not a problem, but we're kind of doing that anyway. If you look at most of the major house builders and you go walk onto a housing plot with say 100, 150 houses, you'll see repeated building. You'll see, I don't know, 4 or 5 house types, and they all look the same. And we're already doing this. I think there's a misunderstanding again of this, if we take a module or a panel or whatever it might be, we do have flexibility with that. It's not a case of it's a box, it's going to remain a box and they're all going to look the same. You think of building blocks, Lego and that type of thing, you can build all sorts of shapes and things with it. And I think that's kind of where there seems to be a bit of a barrier between the market, maybe of what's actually what's possible and to what people believe this sort of MMC modular offsite actually is. So yeah, I think we're already doing it anyway. I just think we can do it better by moving this to a more offsite type build.
Can I just also comment as well, Keira? Because I think what you mentioned, Clare, in terms of the street in Bicester, it's actually about 2 miles that way from me, so I've seen it quite a bit. But also, I'm on a new build housing estate, and there is repeatability within that. And the way the house builders try to do it in terms of offer variation is through a kitchen finish or a tile finish, whatever it might be. So if at the heart of what we're doing as an industry, if we can repeat the core bit, the bit that gives us the structure of the buildings, and then just let the architects, let the designers work their magic on the bits that, I guess, to your point around the Edwardian terrace, the bit that people see, then that's where we can, I guess, move away from the cookie cutter mentality that or the view that people might have on the MMC world. So yeah, it's quite an interesting one, that.
Fantastic. And the three, well, I'm sure everyone agrees with these comments, but exactly on par with what Ensign Design just posted on YouTube in terms of the UK's mass house builders are kind of cut and paste when it comes to aesthetics as well. So I think it's just the perception within the modular because of the manufacturing process. People have these issues about everything looking the same, but you're right. I mean, repeatability is not always a bad thing. Okay, again, a quick tweet for you, Will. Would you consider buying a modular offsite property as your next home? So just on the back of what you were talking about, the traditional buildings, I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, definitely. I kind of already have to a point. I was lucky enough to have an extension done on my property a few years back, and I opted for SIP. So I consider that an offsite type of build. I found it to be fascinating how quickly it went up, how it was all sort of designed and cut and it came to site exactly how kind of I expected it. It went together very, very quickly on site and got sort of obviously bolted together. And the levels of comfort that I have living here is phenomenal. So yeah, for me, 100%. I'd like to sort of push the boundaries, and if I'm lucky enough to be able to afford it, go for the likes of a more high-end passive house type product, because I think that would be fantastic. But 100%, I think they're brilliant.
Thank you very much. Okay, if I can just finish the final question here, Nathan, can offsite construction improve the performance gap between what is designed and what's achieved on site? I think this is a concern that, again, in the industry that we have. Is that something you can comment on?
Yeah, I think it definitely has a role to play. At the moment, there's a massive performance gap between what is designed and what is actually delivered on site. And then there was a study done by, I think it was the NEF, about house builders. They did a study of 100 house builders, and they were like, which was supposed to be designed to building regs, and they did a test on every property, and none of them actually achieved building regs. And it's shocking, sort of the standard can be, the performance gap between what is designed and what's delivered. So I think offsite has a massive role to play for a quality controlled factory environment that ensures good quality and ensures the standard is met. Testing at the right time, we ensure that we air test in the factory, air test and thermal test in the factory, and structural test, and then we also air test and thermal test once it's actually got to site. So we know that what's delivered in the factory and what's delivered on site is exactly the same. And if there is an issue, then we can put it right then, and we don't just let it go under the water. I think it's with also sort of the procedures of sort of BOPAS and ISO 9001. The offsite industry is being pushed to follow these really tight, stringent procedures that just aren't followed on site. And so that will inevitably improve the performance gap between what is designed and what is delivered. And I guess another thing probably is about monitoring, and putting monitoring within buildings is extremely key. We don't do it enough, so we don't ever really get enough real data about how our buildings are performing, but that's something that we are putting into every building that we do. And I think it's really important. I think it's the industry will be moving that way to be able to get that real data on how the buildings are performing.
Thank you. And any other panels, any final additions before we say our goodbyes?
I'd just say again on the testing, again, it's this repeatability and understanding, but we mustn't take it for granted that just because something is built in a factory when it lands on site, it's going to work. So that secondary testing on site is imperative, and the thermal performance testing now is available. You've got the monitoring, you've got the overnight tests, so there's no reason why these can't be integrated. Hopefully it'll be mandated before long, but if we can all move towards that and start evidencing the fact that what we're building offsite far exceeds the quality, then you're going to find that the market will start pushing, especially with one thing we haven't touched on is the increasing energy prices. So all of a sudden, whereas before it wasn't so big a deal, now it's a massive deal. The savings can be calculated and are now tangible. So that was my way. And also sizing heating, that's the other thing, is that it's going to be easier to size heating this way. If we're providing quality buildings that we're testing, we will have heating systems that we can rely on. This move towards air source heat pumps, etc., getting a lot of negativity around that, and that's because of the performance gap quite often and not. So if we can close that performance gap and instill sort of that confidence, I think, you know, we will start making that move towards our net zero future.
Yeah, I think that's an important one. Air source heat pumps work, but if you've got the fabric right. If you don't have the fabric right, then they cost just as much as a normal heating system. So you've got to ensure that the fabric of the building is correct before installing an air source heat pump.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, if I can just say thank you very much to all of you that have given up your time today to come and talk about the future of offsite construction. I personally found it really educational and interesting. I really enjoyed myself today, and I'm sure our audience will feel the same. So we do put out a quick survey, or questionnaire to people that have watched this. So if you're watching, please fill it out. We take all your comments as long as they're constructive. So please fill it out honestly. It helps us shape our future webinars and our future roundtables. Again, really quick date for the diary, Friday the 29th of July at 10 AM. So in just over a month, will be a fantastic case study of products in practice, we call them, around Charleston Farm in Arrow, which is very close to my home. Actually, I could walk there. First spotted this project during one of my lockdown walks with my husband when we were confined to the local fields. So it's just a really interesting design, low energy, use of CLT. The design is fantastic, and primarily, I guess, because it's been designed and delivered as a self-build by an architect called Francis Strachan Fryer. So please join us for that if you can. So it really helps us if you like our video. So give us a thumbs up, click on that button, and please subscribe to our channel. You'll be made aware of anything new which comes onto our channel here. And it's not always webinars, you know, we do product explainers, we do case studies, and so please subscribe and you'll be kept well informed. So thank you again, everyone on the panel. Thank you again to our audience for watching. We really appreciate your support. Have a lovely weekend. I think the sunshine is meant to be going away in Scotland, but I hope anyone down south enjoys it. So have a great time, and hopefully we will see you next time.